After a year-long exclusivity, Stalker 2 is finally out on PS5 consoles. But is it any good? The original Xbox and PC release had a tumultuous beginning back in 2024, with poor performance and a litany of bugs, but developers GSC Game World have had a lot of time to revise their action survival sequel. So what should we expect out of console systems and PC in 2025? To answer that question, I have brought along my friend and colleague, Alex Battaglia. Alex?
Yeah, it's pretty fun to be talking about Stalker 2 again. I also saw this game running on PlayStation 5 Pro at Gamescom, and it's good to see the finished article out right now.
The Black Friday discount season is upon us, with MSI bringing some of its biggest savings ever. Get up to 45% off MSI displays, including their critically acclaimed QD OLEDs like the MPG 272 URX and the MPG 321 URXW, and get a free Borderlands game code when you buy from selected partners. And there's more. Grab up to £100 in Steam codes with select RTX 50 series graphics cards and up to £70 off MSI motherboards, cases and coolers while stocks last. Click the link in the video description below for more details.
So Alex, could you lay out the state of the game when you looked at it last and its kind of general performance level, and also updated us on the state of the game on PC right now, because you have seen some notable improvements there?
Yeah, basically when it launched, kind of like a number of other Unreal Engine 5 titles targeting an open world scenario, this had a number of issues, both on the console and the PC side. On the console side, both GPU and CPU performance seemed to be struggling. So you had a performance mode there, for example, on the Xbox Series X, and it wouldn't be hitting 60 nearly enough for it to actually be really classified as a great 60 FPS experience all throughout the game. It would spend a lot of its time in like a good enough kind of VRR no man's land, but that is not exactly what you want to see for a 60 FPS mode. On PC, I tested the game on a high end and low end, and especially on the low end CPU, you'd really notice really big issues. Like you just run down a road at either high or epic settings, and you could see periodic stutters, CPU limited below 60 FPS constantly. And then you'd hit like the first main Stalker hangout town, and it would just plummet with huge stutters everywhere and easily be sub 30 FPS. That on top of a variety of bugs, issues with the A-Life system that they've now improved on, and it was just really rough beginning for a game that had a lot of heart and soul, and it actually was fun to play, but it was just like not so good. So scroll ahead now, and I just loaded up the game on the Ryzen 5 3600 paired with an RTX 4070 Super, targeting the high settings like I did at launch, and I was playing at 4K ultra performance mode, their DLSS, just to make the game completely CPU limited, and running down the same road like I did on launch. It's more or less lined up here. It's a little bit hard because all of the anomalies in the road you have to worry about, but it's on average, the performance improvement is pretty great. It's 26% CPU limited better performance on this Ryzen 5 3600. And if you look at the frame time graph, it is much steadier while having that average FPS uplift. And when I hit the Stalker town, you can see that it is way, way better. It's still not great, I would say, but it's a lot better on these high settings. So that's awesome to see. So they did at least spend the last year heavily improving the game's CPU limited performance. And based upon what I know from my conversations with them at Gamescom, they are also targeting for later this year, it may have slipped into next, but a UE 5.54 or later upgrade, which should further improve performance and also offer the ability for them to add in features, graphical features to the game that they really couldn't do before because they were on a pretty old engine base, actually.
Yeah, wasn't it 5.1? I think it might be
basically 5.1 it was
still. Yeah.
Yeah, so it was, you don't get the stuff like nanite vegetation, so you have really expensive VSM performance as a result. There's a lot of things. Unreal just in general got way more efficient over time, and obviously they've made their own efficiencies in there. They've branched heavily from base Unreal 5 just to get the game out. But bringing them back together with like RHI improvements that you see with 5.54 and above should hopefully help the game further. But right now we're seeing the the standing of the game as it is before that upgrade.
Yeah, and that's pretty impressive because, like, looking at this footage you've supplied, I mean, yes, it is 26% faster, but it's also like the stutters are, I mean, that's just incredible to see the difference in the stuttering behavior. It's like the current version is pretty steady in terms of frame times, just a little bit of stuttering there, and it's quite good on the new version. So I'm quite satisfied with that. But yeah, I mean, obviously the performance was not very good on consoles like Alex laid out. It was like often 40 to 50 FPS, kind of unsatisfying there in terms of performance, whereas we usually expect current generation games to be pretty stable at 60 FPS. Like, I don't want to say it's a universal rule, but certainly that is what we've observed across the vast majority of current generation software, including UE5 software. Recent UE5 titles have typically held to that standard, minus some traversal hitches and things like that in games like Silent Hill, obviously, but generally they're fairly good. But yeah, now it's basically 60 FPS here on the Xbox Series X in performance mode, except for certain parts of the game's town area, where if you're sprinting through them, it can kind of drop into the upper 50s. So it's actually a pretty good performer. It's like 60 FPS 99 at least % of the time here. In other areas of the game outside of that kind of town area that we're using for stress testing here with streaming, it actually behaves at a consistent 60 FPS. So that's an enormous improvement from where it was at launch. I would say it's a huge improvement. Also, the quality mode, which does target 30 FPS, before that mode still had some frame time wobbles in the mix, including this very, very lengthy stutter, which was a very unfortunate characteristic of the launch code. That basically runs out a locked 30 FPS on Series X, and actually, as an aside, a locked 30 FPS on Series S as well, which I also briefly tested. So those modes are now totally flat, totally locked, basically. Even though you do have a little bit of deviation in that performance mode, you should basically expect a totally flat, locked frame time experience in the quality modes across those consoles. I also tested patch 1.6, which was the patch right before this. So basically when I was testing this game, they updated it several times. And I was testing on Series X. I was testing on patch 1.6, which was the patch prior to this. And in patch 1.7, the performance is hugely improved. So 1.6 even did not have most of these performance improvements in it. It was like in that 40 to 50 FPS range pretty often. I don't have direct footage of this, but that's basically how it ran. So they've clearly made a lot of changes in 1.7 to get the game running in good shape here. And I noticed on their website, initially, like the abstract of their patch notes they published across various platforms didn't include any information on performance optimizations. But if you go into their website and you look through their detailed patch notes, there are like, I don't know, 10 entries here with the word optimized in front of them, or like 15 entries. It's like optimized foliage meshes, optimized foliage materials, optimized buildings, optimized world streaming optimization, optimized lighting, optimized skeletal meshes, all these different things. So clearly, despite not running on 5.54, I don't think, there are clearly a lot of changes here that have gone into this update to make it more performant, presumably on PC and consoles.
It's a lot better, at least on from your position there on the Xbox Series X and on PC, like I just tested. But Oliver, the reason why we're here, PS5, PS5 Pro, what is the game like there?
I know. Well, I hate to disappoint you, Alex, but this is not a super exciting comparison. Although sometimes that's a good thing. Sometimes that's a good thing, which we'll touch on in a moment. PS5 and Series X seem quite similar, but I did count. This is a hard game to pixel count, but I was able to count when you switch modes and like the world pops in and there's like all this crazy stuff. I was able to get some good pixel counts there. And Series X does count a bit higher than PS5, it seems. So like one shot, for instance, looking straight up at the sky, basically. Series X counts to 1440p. PS5 is like 1152p, so it's a bit lower there. And similarly, quality mode seems a little bit lower on PS5 as well. Visually speaking, they both appear fairly similar in stills and reasonably similar in gameplay, just a bit higher in Series X there. Performance is also maybe a touch better on Series X because when you're going through that town area that we're talking about here, that problematic town area, I'm getting a little bit less of that kind of frame time wobbles on Series X. Although both suffer for a similar period of time, it's a little bit less impacted on Series X. Now for PS5 Pro, there do seem to be some maybe more significant visual differences between, let's say, PS5 and PS5 Pro. Shadows do look a little bit different. There's some difference in the VSM there, perhaps a higher setting. The developers talk about A number of changes. They talk about improved shadow quality and resolution, enhanced global illumination, higher quality reflections, improved volumetric fog, and enhanced volumetric cloud rendering. But I think probably a lot of these differences are fairly small, or maybe in the case of like the volumetric clouds, maybe that's just absorbed by kind of upscaling and they're fairly blurry anyways, and what's the difference ultimately? So it basically seems pretty similar between PS5 and PS5 Pro in that respect in terms of visual settings. I'm sure there are some differences. It's just that, in the course of normal gameplay, is there anything you'd really notice? I don't think so, at least at present, right? It seems fairly similar to me. Even in like-for-like matching comparison shots here, I'm not really seeing the impact of those settings differences on PS5 Pro. Resolutions, though, interestingly, are about the same as PS5 or fairly similar to PS5, at least in the couple of shots I was able to count, but the output on PS5 Pro in performance mode does look quite a bit sharper than the base model PS5. So in that mode, maybe there's something different going on with the upsampling there that's producing a cleaner final result, a more 4K-like final result. The quality mode, though, does have a more similar kind of 4K-like output between the two machines. There isn't as much of a difference there. In terms of performance, the performance mode basically hits a full 60 FPS update, except in this town area that I tested. Now, of course, there could be other town areas elsewhere in the game that maybe do have some significant issues as well, but at least in my testing, this was the area that was problematic across the platforms. But it didn't seem as badly affected as either the PS5 or even the Series X. It seemed to be operating at a little bit of a higher performance level than either of those two machines, which is certainly a welcome development for PS5 Pro users, although these are kind of relatively small differences in the grand scheme of things. By and large, the game is a locked 60 FPS experience. Quality mode appears to be a locked 30 FPS experience. In contrast, that mode does not seem to dip at all between any of the console platforms. If you have a 30 FPS targeting mode, it basically hits it. But the key thing here, which is a constant point of concern with PS5 Pro titles, like a constant point of interest, I should say, with PS5 Pro titles, but often a point of concern, is the fact they're not using PSSR. They are using TSR quite clearly. Based on the edge patterns, based on everything we're seeing, it's TSR, which isn't necessarily great in this game because, like you noted in your original coverage, it tends to blur heavily on foliage when you're moving the camera around. And it looks a bit messy overall. Even for TSR, it's unusually messy, I would say, in the open world. It's a little bit odd looking. But I think that's maybe for the best because PSSR and UE5 don't necessarily mix. Obviously, we had Silent Hill F recently, Outer Worlds 2 recently, games like Silent Hill 2 in the past that have had very severe problems, significant problems with UE5 using PSSR. So that's a key issue here, where you get that kind of instability, that characteristic noise and instability in the Lumen GI coverage. Things start to fall apart. That's not really what we like to see. There are some exceptions, like I noted that in Black Myth Wukong, right? That game has a pretty decent PSSR implementation, looks pretty stable. But for the most part with these UE5 games, we don't tend to see good results when developers stray away from TSR, at least in the consoles. Isn't that right, Alex?
Yeah, that's definitely true, Oliver. And based upon my conversations, I actually talked with the CEO, Evgen, at Gamescom, and I specifically mentioned the possibility of beyond graphical changes to that PS5 Pro version implementing PSSR. And their response was pretty clear. They said basically they'd investigated it, and they've also taken a look at the rest of the industry's implementation too, based upon our videos and other coverage. And they said they only would really want to change from TSR if they thought they would be getting a better visual performance for the game. And they basically said that it's not at that point yet, so we wouldn't do it. So they made the choice based upon what they'd seen elsewhere.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense to me. It seems like TSR is really finely tuned and really finely plumbed in to Lumen in particular to make it look good on the consoles. And it seems like you need a kind of very general, very capable machine learning based upscaler in order to have a better outcome with Lumen potentially on a platform like the PC. And PSSR, at least in its current incarnation, seems very finicky, seems very picky, seems to demand some attention, perhaps seems to demand some developer communication with Sony about using PSSR in an appropriate way, like we saw with Assassin's Creed Shadows, for instance, which I think INU looked at that earlier this year, the PSSR upgrade, and that seemed pretty good with PSSR, certainly relative to the TAU they had previously. It did produce a meaningfully better image. So at least in this case, you probably don't have a ton of time. I know these guys have been working on this game quite heavily. And I would note also that like in this update 1.7, they've added a ton of new stuff to the game. I know that they redid the inventory system. The game is a lot less buggy than it was previously, although I still did have a couple crashes on Series X, unfortunately, I do have to report, but it seems to be in a much better state overall than it was a year ago. And obviously those guys have had a difficult time, I imagine, developing this title due to exigent circumstances. But, the game does seem to be in pretty good shape now. And I'm just shocked. Like when that update hit on Series X and I was retesting the game and seeing that super high performance level, it just struck me like, what was going on before? Is this a problem with me? Is this a problem with my system? But no, it just turns out they updated the game with just a radically higher performance level. Kind of shocking, honestly. But super satisfying. So if you bounced off this game originally and you didn't like the performance level perhaps on PC or consoles, or you were holding off for like the ultimate patch that would fix things, this is basically that. Now, of course, there may be 5.5.4 in the future that may improve things further and may bring some visual improvements like Alex mentioned. But for now, I think people would be in pretty good shape to check this game out at the moment, whether on PC or consoles, or indeed on this new PS5 version, new PS5 Pro version. But Alex, I think that's enough for us today. So if you enjoyed this video, please like, subscribe, and press the bell for YouTube notifications. Check out the Patreon at patreon.com/digitalfoundry for exclusive and early access content, and to get in touch, use social media. And from Alex and I,
Auf Wiedersehen.